Okay, well, it is the bottom of the hour. We'd like to introduce our next speakers. So next up, we have Shannon Julius and Rob Graham, who will be talking to you about the Equity Explorer that was mentioned by Dr. Scorza earlier. They'll be talking more about how the Explorer was actually designed, built, and works. So we'll turn it over to Shannon and Rob.
Thanks. I will share a presentation.
All right. Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our presentation today. Rob and I will be talking through the Equity Explorer version 1.0, which is a suite of products that the Los Angeles County Enterprise GIS Group has built in collaboration with Esri, the Advancement Project, and the Office of the CEO, including Dr. D'Artagnan Scorza, who provided today's keynote. So we'll start with some introduction, context for the project. Then we will briefly touch on 4 products, and we will end with a discussion. The products we will show today are in early stages after a development process that began in July, hence the version 1.0. Though departments are currently using the products, we hope to further develop them for a more robust equity mapping program in the county. So next slide. So Dr. Scorza talked about this quite a bit in his keynote, but as a summary, the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, is a federal bill that was signed by the president in March 2021. It invests significantly in improvements to the economic and public health crises due to COVID-19, and about $2 billion of that funding will come to Los Angeles County. In order to ultimately receive this funding from the federal government, the county must document and justify its spending in much detail. As a benchmark for ensuring the money will be spent where it is needed, the guidance prioritizes qualified census tracts as defined by HUD and other geographies based on indicators in the American Community Survey. The Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, or simply the board, produced a plan for this phase 1 ARPA spending, which includes almost $1 billion towards the 3 strategic pillars listed on the right. Over 80 projects within 17 county departments are scheduled to receive funding as part of this phase 1. As part of its plan, the board created its own set of stipulations for the tracking and justification of the spending. Notably, it called for a creation of a COVID-19 recovery index at the census tract level and allocating funding in proportion to COVID recovery need. So what all this means is LA County is required from both the federal government and its own board to use geography, data, and metrics to spend money where it is needed and track the impact of that spending. The Anti-Racism, Diversity, and Inclusion, or ARDI initiative team has been leading the charge on this effort.
Great, and I'll talk a little bit about the index, the COVID index that we developed. So this has been a foundational part of the project so far. Dr. Scorza talked about it a little bit. Really the primary tool that we've been using to explore community need and evaluate how effectively proposed ARPA projects will reach those who most need it. We say that the index is the floor, not the ceiling. So that means, we recognize there's other measures of equity that could be more appropriate to a project. We also recognize that aggregating to census tracts means that individuals can get missed, and that non-geographically concentrated populations are not always captured. So really it serves as a good starting point for a holistic evaluation of equity and the projects. So we developed this index in close collaboration with Advancement Project. It's a nonprofit civil rights organization, actually where I used to work before joining the county. You can see we've grouped indicators into the 3 categories: capturing risk, which is, what is your risk of contracting COVID, severity of, how bad will the illness be, and recovery need, meaning, what are the conditions that can make it harder for a community or an individual to recover from, a devastating illness or, the economic impact of that. So our methodology follows very closely from AP's or Advancement Project's own index, which you can explore further at the race counts link below. And essentially, we rank each of the indicators by percentiles for each of the within each of the 3 categories. We average those rankings to come up with a composite score. And then we average those composite scores for each category together to create an overall index of need. So then the final index categories are then quintiles of that score ranked from highest to lowest need based on the index. And you can see that some of these are duplicated. Some of these indicators are duplicated across the categories. So for example, being in poverty or being below the federal poverty level is both a risk factor. It also influences the severity of what happens if you do get sick, and it also impacts your ability to recover, for your family to be able to recover afterwards. And I'll just also say this methodology is also really similar to Cal EnviroScreen. So if you've used that data set before, that's what we based it off of at AP. And then just quickly, 2 main areas where we did have to kind of deviate from what they originally did. One, we are, as a county directing funding, we are not able to explicitly use race. And I think, due to Prop 209, which Dr. Scorza mentioned also. So we kind of took out those indicators and replaced them with other measures that we felt like identified vulnerability. And then secondly, using census tracts instead of zip codes. A lot of the base data was at the zip code level. We used the HUD crosswalk that's referenced below to be able to translate, those zip code level data into census tracts. And then, just finally, the way that we did it, just kind of technically, we put we took all of these data sets, we put them into a Postgres database. We wrote SQL queries to do the analysis and to generate the rankings and the quintiles and eventually the index scores. And then we published those to ArcGIS Online to make to show on the Equity Explorer, which we'll talk about next.
All right, so the Equity Explorer is a web mapping application built in ArcGIS Online Experience Builder. This application was largely created by Esri, and I saw some of our partners on the call. Thank you for your help with this application. And we worked with them through our professional services program. So this app is where departments with ARPA projects, so they're scheduled to get funding as part of that ARPA money, they've been asked to look at this app to see the existing conditions in terms of the COVID recovery index and other indicators of well-being, again, to make sure that the money is being spent where it's needed. As part of ARPA project design, department coordinators are being asked to review the indicators in this map and use them to identify their project geography. So let's open up the app. I'll see if it makes you sign in.
Okay, did that work?
I'm still seeing the slides. You might need to reshare your screen, or if you want, I can pull it up on my
Okay,
screen.
do that.
All right, thank you all. Yep, there it is. Okay, so the layer that is turned on when you first open, oh, I'm seeing slides again, Rob. There it is. The layer that is turned on when you first open the app is the COVID index. The index was split into quintiles for an easy relative comparison of COVID recovery need by census tract. So in the bottom right, you can see highest, high, moderate, low, and lowest. Those are the 5 quintiles. On the left side, there are filters, which create an easy way to identify tracts that meet certain conditions, such as being in the highest COVID need tier. Yep, right there. And then just turn the filter on. Yep. So there are those tracks, and at the bottom, we get a quick summary of how many are selected. So then on the right side, you can see a list of layers. So when D'Artagnan Scorza was talking, if you saw, there was like there was just a really long list of data, and many of those data sets have been included here. There are ACS variables, publicly available data sets, and some aggregated county data. The list has gotten quite long, and it does take some attention to detail to understand what exactly you are looking at. So, you know, they're not really built to be overlaid, but just as more requests came in for more data, we added them to the list. So the last step is to export a table of census tracts, which is then submitted to the Equity Explorer report, which Rob will talk about next. So if you've worked with Esri web apps, you know, you can open the tables up and export all or a selection. And so we're sort of asking departments to go in and draw or filter out the tracks they're going to target and then export it to a CSV to be submitted into a report. So we can transition back to the slides, Rob. After quickly looking at this app, you can see that there are areas of improvement. For example, it would be nice to get statistics of project areas on the fly rather than needing to export a table to then import into another reporting system. We're also learning that this is a relatively new intersection of GIS technology and grant funding planning. So there's more work to do for training staff and simplifying the user interface to really make sure everyone can take advantage of this data to do their planning. And this app has sparked an interest within the county in using geography to plan spending in an effective, equitable way. And we believe that further development of this or similar tools will involve interdepartment coordination to improve data sharing and prioritize public open data. At present, this app is only shared with members of the RD group. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Great, and I'm going to talk about the Equity Explorer report, which is, you know, kind of the next step in the process. So departments can use the Equity Explorer to you know, define their project areas and design their project, and then export census tracts. Building off of that, then we are able to we created software to be able to analyze the community conditions at the census tract level. The script takes that table and then generates an Excel output that reports like the distribution of those tracts across the COVID index need tiers, which are the index, and other indicators related to equity. And then in addition, as you can see in the one below, it also just lists out all the different indicators that are in the report for each of the census tracts. So those are, yeah, and then you can use the filters in that to then identify tracts that meet certain criteria. And we have, you know, about 80 indicators that are represented here, ranging from housing, demographics, income, existing county programs such as CalFresh, and other, you know, equity-based indexes such as the Social Vulnerability Index, the Concentrated Disadvantage Index, and Healthy Places Index. And so really the main goal of the report, or the main goals of the report, are to compare the distribution of tracts across the COVID need tiers with the board approved formula. So you can see here, ideally you would have, you know, 40% of your project area tracts falling in the highest need category, down to just 2% going into the lowest need category. If you're kind of hitting those marks, then that's great. But if not, like I said, you know, this is not the only evaluation tool. And, you know, so we realized, like, while the index is robust, there are, you know, depending on the aggregation, depending on project goals and targeted communities, some of these other indicators may be more applicable to a project, which is why we have so many of them included. Along with the index, we store this data, you know, in Postgres, and then we run it as a Python script to take in the submitted census tracts and create this report, do the summarizing, do the data processing, and then write to the Excel file with the processing. And then departments can either submit their reports through the Survey 123 forms that we'll be showing next, or they can provide them directly to RD, and then they will pass them over to us. And ideally, the data coming into it comes as census tracts, although we're also able to geocode them as needed to associate the tracts and go from there.
And here's your polite 5-minute warning.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so we knew there would be a need to track project approval and metrics, and the original board motion stipulated that these details must be visualized on a dashboard. It specifically said that. The GIS team introduced the idea of structured data entry and suggested Survey 123 as the mechanism due to the quick turnaround required, about 10 days. But then 10 days turned into 5 months, and in that time, both the US Treasury and entities within LA County, including County Council, added new data reporting requirements, a lot of new data reporting requirements. So the form has grown to nearly 200 questions, and at this point is pushing the limits of the Survey 123 application. So far, about 10 departments have submitted their project design using this tool. The form submissions trigger a Microsoft Power Automate flow, which drops the data into a SharePoint environment. From there, it can be reviewed by the RD team, County Council, and more. We've found some issues with the Esri to Microsoft connection, from the webhook randomly dropping to needing to manage the Esri backend domain names where underscores are used instead of spaces. So just if anyone's interested in implementing a workflow like this, feel free to talk to us. We can talk about the specific issues we found and the workarounds we've made. So even so, this data entry mechanism is arguably improvement over CARES Act tracking, which relied on dozens of spreadsheets every month, or so we've been told. So this tool at least collects all data entries into a single source of truth location using automation tools.
Great, and I'll just quickly touch on kind of challenges in future. I think just like Shannon was mentioning with the technology, integrating some of the technology, especially the Survey 123 to SharePoint, has been a challenge. It's I think she described that well. You can reach out to us. This is a growing project, and so it's really great that the project is rapidly expanded and it's progressed a lot since we started. But we've Shannon and I and the Esri team and the RD team, we've all been just working hard to hold all the pieces together. But I think now that we're getting to this base level of functionality and a workable system, we're really excited to apply what we've learned so far to improving the products and adding efficiency into the workflows. Internal data sharing, I think, is I was super excited when I came to the county, cool, I get to just work with all the county data. It's not that simple, obviously. There's a lot of the data, rightfully so, especially with confidentiality concerns, is held under distinct data sharing agreements, NDAs, and that's something that we've been working through as well. For the future, dashboarding, making the Equity Explorer public, kind of giving more of a public facing piece to this project, and being able to expand these tools to be used with the by the public, by other organizations in addition to the county. Doing more automation so that we're not having to do so much, maybe emailing files or manually checking things, and just assessing our tool sets and our technology. And we've been kind of in a rapid development phase for a while, so it's really how can we just make sure we're making the best decisions with our technology. And I think starting with that, we've been working with the ISD forms team and SharePoint teams to really help with that part of the process, and doing that maybe a little bit more efficiently. Also, we're hoping to empower departments throughout the county to really use their own data effectively. And I know a lot of departments are doing that already. Some have GIS staff, some don't. And so, we're we're looking at ways that we can be supportive of that process.
Okay, great. So I guess the time for questions. I see there's already some questions that we've received, so we can go to that. Yeah.
Sure. Well, thank you, Shannon and Rob, for the great presentation and a little bit of what's under the hood of the Equity Explorer. We have a number of questions, so let's just get into it. Is the data using 2010 or 2020 census tracts, and are these data available to download as shape files or data tables for offline use?
So it's the 2020 census tract geography, right, Rob?
I believe, sorry, I think that it is the 2010 census tracts.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And then most of the data on there, or at least most of the public data from ACS is the 2019 5-year estimates. And yeah, and to the second part of the question, I think right now, like we said, it's only shared within the organization and I think even within a certain group within the organization. But those layers, there are some public layers that I think that you can just download shapefiles for. And then, you know, as we open up more of it, more of that will become available.
Yeah, and some of those layers are just linked in the bottom of this presentation on the Equity Explorer page. Things like the Healthy Places Index. There's just, yeah, these other kind of indexes that exist out and about, Concentrated Disadvantage Index. And so there's a few links there. And if you want a more comprehensive list, a lot of the stuff is public. So feel free to reach out to us directly.
Okay, and then we have another question from Nikki at Esri. Are there any plans to have data in the Equity Explorer available at a smaller geographic level, like block or block groups, or being able to filter by different jurisdictions like cities, unincorporated, council districts, neighborhood districts, etc.? So,
Rob, you want to take that one?
Sure. So to the second part of the question, so there is the ability to filter by cities or the countywide statistical areas, which are kind of like cities/neighborhoods in there now, and then also like supervisor districts. The first part, I mean, I think that, yeah, I would love to have us be able to use blocks or block groups. You know, I think we definitely want to use the smallest level geography that we can. But I think the issue that we've come across, well, especially with the index when we were developing that, was that a lot of the indicators were just not available at that small of a geography. And there may be, you know, there may be other indicators that we want to use for things that we could use, but we just have to, yeah, we just have to make sure we, I guess, have coverage for those indicators, you know, at blocks or block groups. And then some things that we'd like to include, like county services, are, you know, at point locations, at least at their core, that we would aggregate up. So I think we'll look into, you know, how far we have to aggregate those things to be able to show them on the map, and especially to be able to show them publicly, to, you know, just to make sure we're not personally identifying anyone, but at the same time, yeah, just getting to the most granular level of detail we can.
all right, great. And then I had some other questions come in. How often are the main data sets updated? And is it a high level effort to crunch the numbers again?
So, okay, so this is a big part of the reason why Postgres is in the equation. And Rob can talk more of the details of that. But using that tool means if a new data set comes in, all of the analysis is in there as a SQL code. So you don't have to do the analysis again. You just replace the data set itself in the database. Then there's just a process to upload to ArcGIS Online. As far as what we've done so far, we're still in our first cut of all these data sets. It's still our version 1, and actually we've yet to even set a schedule. So that's part of the future work as well. Rob, did I do okay explaining the Postgres bit? Definitely recommend GIS people. I know I'm new to it myself. It's a really great way to have data sets update.
Yeah, and especially, and also, you know, when you're doing things like the index, because it's kind of all built in SQL code, it makes it pretty straightforward to, you know, switch in and out indicators as you're kind of testing things. So if you want to, you know, try a different indicator to see how it affects the index, for example. You can kind of drop it in and then take it back out and that sort of thing.
Okay, well, very good. We are at 5 of the hour. So I want to thank you both again for the great presentation. We will resume at 12 noon with our next presenter, Joe Toland from USGS. So take 5 and we'll be back shortly.